Hi, I continue to be Eemeli. As mentioned in my previous talk, I've been working on a YAML library. I don't know if you mentioned that, yeah, sorry. Fundamentally, what I want to explain slightly is why. Because I like solving problems. And essentially, it's one of those cases where if I'm not provided with good enough problems, I'm going to make up my own problems. And almost always, the solutions to those problems are somewhere much deeper than you might think. Effectively, it's a situation where you really should always be treating the disease, not the symptoms. And it's just that sometimes convincing clients or bosses or investors that you really should spend a lot of time on something like building your own YAML library, because no one's ever done that before, it makes sense. And it's much more relaxing to just do that for fun, because it's fun, trust me, please. And therefore, you don't need to attribute a price to the work that you're taking care of. And that means that you're building tools. And tools have this fundamental problem of always having flaws. Same with paradigms, but with tools and paradigms, either they're old and crufty or they're new and buggy. And they're never really anything very much in the middle, at least for very long. Hello, Redux. And they're never really exactly tuned for the job you've got. So you need to customize, tune them, work on them continuously, always. And tools, I believe, should follow the Unix philosophy of do one thing and do it well. And effectively, this is the reason why your node modules folder is the way it is. And one of the important things to realize, if you're doing one thing, then your one thing will have some sort of an API and some sort of documentation. The API might be complete crap, and the documentation might be completely missing, but technically you can imagine them having them. And if your thing has an API and a documentation, or at least the place where they're supposed to be, really it's a tool that you've got. The next realization that I've taken is that tools are not a business. Software is not really a business. Service is. And if you're building a business around your tool, then effectively what you're doing is, the business that you're doing is marketing. And therefore, it's much, much nicer to just skip the whole thing of the money having to exchange hands and write open source, because then you can just solve interesting problems. And that's what I tend to do. And the takeaway that I get out of solving interesting problems is that I learn stuff, because there's always a bigger picture. And if you don't learn, then you don't also find new problems to solve later. And the particular problem that I've spent some time working on is localization and human languages and how those work with computers, and trying to, make all of that work. And also the workflows around how does localization need to happen. And come to the conclusion that there is not one solution for everything. There are many different parts of it. And I've put together a number of different libraries and tools that are available online. Some of them I've not worked on for a while. Some of them I'm still working on. React Message Context is the one I mentioned in particular earlier. The Babel plugin, then, that's the thing that I'm really have spent like half a year on now. And the half a year is mainly because I've figured out that, good grief, I need to build my own YAML library because of this. I want to write JavaScript like you see on the top left there, where there's a plural function that you just call, and it just looks like JavaScript. And you define then a message that takes in some pluralization cases And I want to handle the case of when you have this in your JavaScript, and you need to get that to work in different languages. And the particular thing that I think needs to, or would be really cool if it worked there, is that you could transpile the JavaScript into message format, which you then store in a YAML file, which you can then localize the YAML file's contents and then have it all sort of work and be magical. And the tricky part in this whole thing that's happening there, never mind the fact that, I'm transpiling JavaScript into message format, that turns out to have been like a week of work. But the 6 months of work that I'm still working on are that's the fundamental thing that I want to make work. I want to write a YAML file that has comments in it. Because YAML is a really nice file format because you can have multi-line strings, and it looks human. It doesn't look scary. And yes, you can break it, and it can, be ugly. But it's got comments in it as well. And with the comments, you can tell where is this message coming from. And that's rather important for people like translators who need to work on that message, or, even if the translator is you down the road. And not a single YAML library supports comments programmatically. So I've been writing my own. It's a good thing I started on this before Googling a little bit and finding some interesting comments like, no one in their right mind would want to write a parser for it, still they exist. Or that the YAML spec is larger than the XML and XML namespaces specs combined. It's a ridiculously wide and inclusive spec. I don't know why the authors didn't just go for a single, simple syntax instead of trying to make it do everything. And to be honest, they've got really good points there. But I came across these comments only after having done most of the work. So it was a matter of, sunken costs and all that. Yeah. So the thing about YAML spec is that in the comments section there, it says that comments must not have any effect on the serialization tree or representation graph. Effectively, it means that when you're reading a YAML file, you're not supposed to get anything out of the comments. And that's exactly the reverse of what I wanted. And therefore that. I'm working on the 1.0 release because it's still got things that I'm not completely happy with, but it's available if you want to play with it. It's relatively feature complete, as in my test cases cover all of the tests on YAML I could find anywhere at all. And at one point, took me, in that case, about a day to realize that the reason why a particular test was failing was not because, my code was buggy. Is because there was a mistake in the YAML spec. And I've got half a dozen issues and pull requests on the YAML spec for fixes. Some of those have been gone in and approved. The name was a nice surprise. There is a YAML library that was released a couple of years ago with the name YAML. And they just had, the guys behind it haven't done much with it in recent years. So I asked nicely. And soon you'll be able to do an npm install YAML and get my thing. Now you need to add the next tag there. But yeah, that's why I YAML. And thank you for listening. And feel free to question my sanity.